Imagine standing at the edge of an ancient ruin, staring at a puzzle carved in stone, something left behind by people who walked this earth thousands of years ago. A mystery so deep it feels like the past is whispering secrets just out of reach. Now picture this, science stepping in like a master detective, unraveling those whispers one clue at a time. For centuries, history's greatest enigmas have taunted us. Vanished civilizations, cryptic artifacts, lost technologies, all seeming impossible to decode. But here's the thrilling truth. Modern science has cracked the code on mysteries that once left even the sharpest minds utterly stumped. Take the Antikythera Mechanism, a bizarre bronze device pulled from a shipwreck over 100 years ago. At first glance, it looked like a lump of corroded metal, but when researchers peered inside, they found gears and dials so precise it could predict celestial events with stunning accuracy, a 2,000-year-old computer. Or consider the Nazca Lines, those massive drawings etched into Peru's desert floor, invisible from the ground. For generations, no one knew who made them or why, until aerial photography and soil analysis revealed their purpose as part of ritual pathways tied to water worship. Time and again, science has turned the impossible into the undeniable, peeling back layers of history with tools our ancestors couldn't have dreamed of. That's exactly what we're diving into today. 25 jaw-dropping moments where science solved ancient riddles that once seemed forever lost. From decoding forgotten languages to uncovering the real fate of legendary figures, each discovery is a testament to human ingenuity. Think of it as a time machine built not with gears and wires, but with DNA sequencing, satellite imaging, and painstaking detective work. Whether it's exposing the truth behind cursed tombs or reconstructing voices from the distant past, these breakthroughs don't just rewrite history, they make it come alive. So if you've ever wondered how the dots of our shared story finally connect, get ready. The past is about to get a lot less mysterious. When divers first pulled the Antikythera mechanism from the wreckage of an ancient Greek ship in the early 1900s, no one could have guessed the secrets hidden beneath its corroded surface. At first glance, it resembled nothing more than a lump of bronze and wood, just another artifact lost to time. But when scientists finally peered inside using X-ray imaging, they uncovered something astonishing. An intricate system of gears, dials, and inscriptions so precise, it could track the movements of the sun, moon, and even predict eclipses. This wasn't just any relic, it was a 2,000-year-old astronomical calculator, a mechanical marvel far ahead of its time. The real breakthrough came with advanced three-dimensional modeling, which allowed researchers to virtually reconstruct the device's inner workings. What they found was nothing short of genius. Tiny interlocking gears mimicked the orbits of celestial bodies, while inscribed markers acted as a built-in calendar for tracking Olympic cycles. The mechanism even accounted for irregularities in the moon's motion, a level of sophistication unmatched until the Renaissance. For centuries, historians assumed ancient civilizations lacked the technology for such precise mechanical computation. Yet here was proof that Greek engineers had built a functioning analog computer centuries before the modern era. But the most haunting question remains: who designed it? The Antikythera mechanism suggests a lost tradition of scientific craftsmanship, hinting at knowledge that may have vanished with its creators. Was it the work of a lone genius or part of a broader technological lineage we've yet to uncover? Whatever the answer, this ancient computer stands as a humbling reminder sometimes the past holds secrets even science is only beginning to understand. Hidden for centuries in the private libraries of European royalty, the Voynich Manuscript is arguably history's most perplexing puzzle. Filled with bizarre illustrations of unidentifiable plants, celestial diagrams, and naked women bathing in strange green liquid, its pages are written in an alphabet no one has ever seen, a script so cryptic that even top codebreakers from both world wars failed to crack it. For decades, this 15th century book seemed destined to remain a silent relic, its secrets locked away by time. That is, until artificial intelligence stepped in. In 2017, researchers fed the manuscript symbols into an AI trained to recognize patterns in human languages. The algorithm detected something startling. The text wasn't random gibberish. Certain word structures matched known languages, particularly Hebrew and Arabic, suggesting the manuscript might have been encoded using an advanced cipher. The AI even proposed partial translations, revealing phrases like farmer, light, and air, hints that the book could be an herbal or scientific guide. Yet the mystery only deepens from there. Why would someone go to such lengths to conceal a medical or botanical text? Some linguists argue the AI's findings are inconclusive, pointing out that the translations remain fragmentary and open to interpretation. Others propose even wilder theories that the manuscript is a hoax, an elaborate work of fiction, or even a relic from a lost civilization. One thing's certain, the Voynich Manuscript refuses to give up its secrets easily. Every breakthrough seems to raise new questions, proving that even with cutting-edge technology, some ancient puzzles still keep part of their soul hidden in the shadows. What we're left with is a tantalizing glimpse into a mind or an entire culture that thought in ways we're only beginning to decipher. Stretching across nearly 200 square miles of Peru's arid desert, the Nazca Lines have baffled explorers since their rediscovery in the 1920s. From the ground, these enormous geoglyphs look like little more than shallow trenches scratched into reddish soil, but from the air, they transform into staggering works of art. Sprawling monkeys, hummingbirds with wingspans rivaling jumbo jets, even a humanoid figure nicknamed the astronaut, all etched with such precision that their creators could never have seen their full glory. For nearly a century, theories about their purpose ranged from alien landing strips to ancient astronomical calendars, but modern technology finally gave us answers hidden in plain sight. High-resolution satellite imagery and drone surveys revealed something earlier observers missed. The lines aren't isolated artworks. They form a vast network leading to ceremonial sites and sources of water, suggesting they were pilgrimage routes for rituals begging the desert for rain. Soil samples showed the Nazca people scraped away dark surface stones to expose lighter earth beneath, creating contrast that lasts millennia. But the real marvel: they achieved this without aerial views or advanced tools. Archaeologists discovered wooden stakes and ropes at key points, proof the Nazca used basic surveying techniques, perhaps scaling up small models using grids and ropes to maintain proportions. The most haunting detail, footprints preserved near the lines show groups walking them in ceremonial processions, their movements synchronized like a dance. This wasn't just art, it was a desperate conversation with the gods. When drought parched the land around 450 CE, the lines grew more intricate, as if their creators believed greater effort might bring back the rains. Today, drones and spectroscopy continue uncovering new glyphs, each discovery a whisper from a civilization that turned barren Earth into a canvas for hope. What began as a mystery of how has become a far deeper question. What would you draw if your survival depended on the sky noticing? For centuries, the Shroud of Turin has captivated believers and skeptics alike, a length of linen bearing the ghostly imprint of a crucified man, revered by many as the actual burial cloth of Jesus Christ. Its eerie, haunting image seems to stare back through time, its origins shrouded in devotion and controversy. But when science turned its gaze on this sacred relic, the truth it revealed was far more complicated than legend suggested. In the late 1980s, researchers secured permission to cut a small sample from the shroud's edge for radiocarbon dating, a technique that measures the decay of carbon-14 to estimate an object's age. 3 independent labs in Oxford, Zurich, and Arizona analyzed the fabric. Their verdict, the linen dated to between 1260 and 1390, firmly placing its creation in the medieval period. This finding was a seismic blow to claims of its ancient origin, suggesting instead that the shroud was a pious work of art, perhaps even a devotional forgery from the Middle Ages. Yet the story doesn't end there. Forensic studies added another layer of intrigue. Textile experts noted the shroud's weave matched known medieval fabrics, while pollen analysis revealed traces of plants common to Europe, not the Middle East. Bloodstain pattern analysis even raised questions. The blood flows on the cloth didn't align with gravity's pull on a supine body. Some researchers proposed the image could have been created using a primitive form of photography, like a camera obscura, or even a chemical reaction between pigments and linen. Still, mystery lingers. How did such intricate detail, down to individual whip marks and anatomical accuracy, emerge in an era without modern medical knowledge? And why does the image lack brushstrokes or pigment residues typical of paintings? The shroud remains an enigma wrapped in faith, a testament to humanity's longing to touch the divine. Science may have traced its threads to medieval Europe, but the debate, like the faint, haunting figure on the cloth itself, refuses to fade. When archaeologists first unearthed the Terracotta army in 1974, the world marveled at its lifelike warriors, but few realized these statues were once a riot of color. Buried for over 2,000 years, the figures emerged with their painted surfaces flaking away within minutes of exposure to air, leaving behind the muted earthen tones we see today. For decades, the warriors' true appearance remained a fading ghost in the archaeological record until science stepped in to resurrect their lost brilliance. Advanced chemical analysis of microscopic paint fragments revealed an astonishing palette. Vibrant purples derived from synthetic barium copper silicate, a pigment previously thought to have been invented in Europe during the 19th century. Electric greens came from malachite, deep blues from azurite, and rich reds from cinnabar, each hue mixed with precise ratios of egg, glue, and lacquer to create durable, weather-resistant coatings. Researchers even identified organic binding agents like animal blood and bone marrow, ingredients that gave the paint both flexibility and a glossy sheen. But the real breakthrough came when scientists reconstructed the ancient recipes using these findings. By replicating the exact mineral mixtures and organic binders, they produced swatches that matched the original colors perfectly. This wasn't just artistry, it was advanced chemistry. The Qin dynasty artisans had mastered techniques to prevent fading and cracking, knowledge lost for millennia. Infrared spectroscopy later revealed something even more startling. Some warriors were painted in gradients, with sleeves transitioning from crimson to gold, suggesting a level of detail rivaling Renaissance frescoes. Why such extravagance for an army meant to stay buried? The answer lies in the ancient Chinese belief that the afterlife mirrored the living world. These weren't mere statues, they were fully equipped soldiers, each intended to serve Emperor Qin Shi Huang in eternity. Their colors weren't just decorative, they were functional, a way to ensure the emperor's protection never faded. Today, conservation teams use humidity-controlled cases to preserve the remaining traces of pigment, while spectral imaging allows us to digitally repaint the warriors, restoring them to the dazzling spectacle they once were. The Terracotta Army's true legacy isn't just in its scale or craftsmanship, but in the bold declaration it makes: even in darkness, color endures. The Great Pyramid of Giza has guarded its secrets for over 4,500 years, its massive limestone blocks whispering of engineering feats we're only beginning to understand. For centuries, archaeologists speculated about hidden chambers within its labyrinthine passages, rooms that might hold clues to how such a colossal structure was built, or even treasures left for the pharaoh's journey to the afterlife. But how do you explore sealed spaces without dismantling history itself? Enter muon tomography, a revolutionary technique that uses cosmic rays to see through solid rock like an X-ray for pyramids. When scientists deployed muon detectors in the pyramid's lower chambers, the results were staggering. scans revealed a previously unknown void above the Grand Gallery, a space nearly 100 feet long, its purpose still a mystery. Even more intriguing, a smaller cavity was detected near the pyramid's north face, aligned with hidden corridors that might once have served as construction pathways. These aren't just empty rooms, their precise angles and placements suggest deliberate design, possibly tied to religious symbolism or structural engineering secrets. The discovery rewrote our understanding of the pyramid's interior, proving that even after millennia of study, ancient wonders still have layers waiting to be peeled back. Meanwhile, across the English countryside, another prehistoric marvel was giving up its own secrets. Stonehenge's towering blue stones have long puzzled researchers. Why would Neolithic builders haul 80 massive stones from the Preseli Hills in Wales, a grueling journey of over 150 miles? Geochemical fingerprinting finally cracked the case. By analyzing the stone's mineral composition, scientists matched them to specific quarries in Western Wales, where outcrops of spotted dolerite bear identical crystalline patterns. But the real shock came when excavations uncovered ancient tool marks and extraction platforms at the Welsh sites, proving the stones weren't just scavenged. They were deliberately mined around 3000 BC, centuries before Stonehenge's construction. The logistics of transporting these monoliths are mind-bending. Some weigh over 4 tons, yet prehistoric communities moved them across rivers, mountains, and possibly even by raft along the coast. Recent experiments suggest wooden sledges and woven ropes could have made the journey feasible, but the why remains tantalizingly unclear. Were the blue stones chosen for their unique acoustic properties, they ring like bells when struck, or their reputed healing powers, as local folklore claims? What's certain is that both the pyramid's hidden chambers and Stonehenge's far-flung stones reveal the same truth. Ancient builders didn't just work with what they had. They pursued vision with relentless precision, crossing distances and defying limits we're only now learning to measure. Science hasn't just illuminated these mysteries, it's shown us how much grander the past really was. Hidden in the dry caves near the Dead Sea for 2,000 years, the fragile fragments of the Dead Sea Scrolls have long tantalized scholars with their glimpses into ancient religious thought. But as researchers painstakingly reassembled these crumbling texts, they faced a puzzle worthy of detective fiction: how to determine which scattered pieces belonged together when time had erased so many clues. The breakthrough came not from studying the words themselves, but from the very animal skins they were written on. Cutting-edge DNA analysis revolutionized our understanding by extracting genetic material from the parchment's collagen. Scientists discovered something remarkable. The scrolls were made primarily from sheep and cow hides, with distinct genetic signatures that varied by cave. This meant fragments sharing identical DNA likely came from the same original document, even if found miles apart. One scroll, for instance, had pieces scattered across 3 different caves until genetic testing proved they were all part of a single sheep's hide, carefully prepared and inscribed centuries ago. The implications stretch far beyond simple reconstruction. By tracing these biological fingerprints, researchers could map the scroll's movements across the Qumran region. Some caves showed exclusive use of locally sourced sheepskins, suggesting scribble workshops operating nearby. Others contained parchments with DNA-matching cattle from distant valleys, evidence of trade networks or scrolls carried by travelers. Most startling were the rare fragments made from ibex skin, their unique genetics pointing to nomadic Bedouin tribes who may have stored or protected certain texts. But the real revelation lay in what these genetic breadcrumbs told us about the scroll's origins. Previously debated theories of whether the texts were the work of a single sect or multiple groups gained new clarity. DNA proved some caves functioned almost like ancient libraries, with scrolls produced over generations from similar animal stocks. Others were time capsules of diversity, their mixed DNA hinting at documents collected from across Judea during turbulent times. Now, when scholars piece together passages about rituals or prophecies, they can do so with newfound confidence, knowing that the parchment itself whispers secrets about who wrote it, where it traveled, and how it survived. The scroll's genetic code doesn't just reconnect fragments, it rewrites our understanding of how knowledge was preserved in the shadows of history. Every strand of DNA is a thread in a larger story, one where science and scripture intertwine to reveal truths no single discipline could uncover alone. Found in the ruins of a 2,000-year-old village near Baghdad, this unassuming clay jar doesn't look like much, just a 5-inch vase sealed with asphalt containing an iron rod surrounded by a copper cylinder. But when German archaeologist Wilhelm Koenig examined it in the 1930s, he made a startling claim. This could be the world's oldest known battery. Recreations of the so-called Baghdad Battery suggest it wasn't just a storage vessel. Filled with an acidic electrolyte like vinegar or grape juice, the jar generates around 1 volt of electricity, enough to produce a faint tingling sensation, or as some experiments showed, electroplate gold onto silver objects. Modern engineers who have built replicas confirm the design works remarkably well, with the copper acting as a positive terminal and the iron as a negative one, separated by the asphalt stopper to prevent short-circuiting. Ancient Mesopotamians might not have understood electron flow, but they could have stumbled upon the basic principles through trial and error. Yet here's where the debate ignites. Skeptics argue that no wires or electroplated artifacts have been found alongside these jars, and the asphalt seal might have simply preserved scrolls stored inside. Others counter that organic materials like wires could have decayed over millennia, leaving no trace. Intriguingly, similar vessels discovered in Sumerian sites contained scrolls, but their metal components were mysteriously absent. Could these jars have served dual purposes, storing sacred texts while occasionally powering something more? The most tantalizing theory comes from a discovery in the ruins of Seleucia, where a Babylonian priest's headdress was found coated in an ultra-thin layer of gold. Traditional gilding methods couldn't explain its precision, but electroplating could. If the Baghdad Battery was indeed a tool for artisans, it would rewrite our understanding of ancient technological sophistication. Imagine a workshop where these cells, linked in series, gilded statues, or even produced medicinal shocks for pain relief, a concept hinted at in Greek texts describing electric fish therapies. What's undeniable is this: whether battery, storage jar, or something else entirely, the artifact challenges our assumptions about how innovation unfolds. Sometimes the past doesn't just whisper, it hums with currents we're only beginning to measure. High in the Andes, the fortress of Sacsayhuamán stands as a monument to Inca engineering genius, its massive zigzag walls built from stones so precisely fitted that not even a razor blade can slip between them. For centuries, the method behind this impossible masonry puzzled archaeologists. How could a civilization without iron tools or the wheel achieve such perfection? The answer finally came when laser scanning technology mapped every contour of these colossal blocks in microscopic detail, revealing secrets invisible to the naked eye. The scans showed something astonishing. Rather than carving rectangular blocks, Inca stonemasons shaped each piece to interlock like a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. Using handheld granite tools and abrasive sand, they meticulously rubbed stones together, testing the fit over and over until friction alone held them in place. Some boulders weigh over 100 tons, yet their surfaces curve and dip to match neighboring stones with sub-millimeter precision. But the real breakthrough came when researchers analyzed the scans with algorithms designed to detect patterns. They found that many stones weren't just randomly shaped, their undulating surfaces followed mathematical ratios seen in nature, mimicking the way river rocks wear smooth against one another over time. This suggests the Inca didn't just copy nature, they accelerated its processes through deliberate technique. Some blocks even have hidden knobs carved into their sides, likely used as handles for adjustments during placement. Perhaps most remarkably, the laser data revealed that the walls aren't static structures. The stones shift slightly during earthquakes, settling back into place without collapsing, a feature modern engineers call kinetic architecture. This explains why Sacsayhuamán has endured devastating quakes that toppled Spanish colonial buildings nearby. The Incas didn't just build for the present, they crafted a legacy meant to outlast empires. Today, those same scans help conservators protect the site by identifying subtle stress points invisible to human eyes. What began as a mystery of mortarless joints has become a masterclass in sustainable design, proving that sometimes the oldest solutions are the most revolutionary. The stones of Sacsayhuamán don't just sit together, they converse across centuries in a language of friction and balance, whispering secrets modern architects are only beginning to decode. The towering stone faces of Easter Island have stood silent for centuries, their blank eyes gazing inland as if guarding secrets from a lost world. For generations, the question of how the Rapa Nui people moved these colossal moai, some weighing over 80 tons across miles of rugged terrain, seemed unanswerable. Early European visitors spun wild theories that the statues walked themselves or that a vanished race of giants had placed them. But modern science, paired with revived ancestral knowledge, has uncovered a truth far more ingenious than fiction. The first clue came from the island's soil itself. Archaeologists noticed curious grooves worn into ancient roads' parallel tracks too precise to be natural erosion. Chemical analysis revealed something astonishing. These paths were once slick with sweet potato paste, a slippery organic lubricant that would have reduced friction. Nearby, teams found broken palm fibers that matched descriptions in Rapa Nui oral histories of massive ropes woven from the island's now vanished forests. Together, these fragments painted a picture, teams hauling statues upright on sledges, guided by ropes along purpose-built causeways, their bases gliding over the vegetable grease like skis on snow. But the real breakthrough came when researchers combined these findings with a surviving tradition. Island elders had long spoken of the moai walking to their platforms, a phrase outsiders dismissed as myth. Then, in 2012, a team tested the idea experimentally. Using replica ropes, they demonstrated how rhythmic side-to-side rocking could make a 3-ton moai pivot forward in a stuttering gait, covering hundreds of yards in a day. The statues didn't literally walk, but with coordinated pulls they could be walked by human hands, their center of gravity kept carefully balanced. Satellite imagery later revealed something even more remarkable. The roads weren't flat. They sloped slightly downhill toward the coast, meaning gravity assisted the transport. Laser scans showed where patterns on statue bases consistent with this rocking motion, while tool marks on abandoned moai along the route suggested repairs mid-journey. The Rapa Nui hadn't just brute forced their monuments into place, they'd engineered an entire logistics system, combining physics, botany, and generations of hard-won skill. Perhaps the most poignant detail, the very deforestation that made moving the moai possible using palm wood for ropes and sledges ultimately contributed to the island's ecological collapse. What began as a triumph of innovation became a cautionary tale. Today, when we see those silent stone faces, we're not just looking at art, we're seeing the ghost of a civilization's ambition, a testament to how far humans will go to leave their mark on the world, and the unintended consequences that can follow. Science hasn't just solved how the moai moved, it's revealed the fragile line between triumph and tragedy, etched as deeply as the statue's own weathered features. When hikers stumbled upon Ötzi, the Iceman in the Italian Alps in 1991, they had no idea they'd discovered the most well-preserved human from the Copper Age. But it wasn't just his 5,300-year-old body that amazed scientists, it was the incredibly detailed snapshot of his final hours preserved in his stomach. Advanced CT scans and microscopic analysis revealed a last meal so intact, it reads like a crime scene report from the Stone Age. The contents, a dense, high-energy mix of cured ibex meat, red deer fat, and ancient wheat called einkorn, all finely ground and likely eaten as a kind of primitive jerky or pemmican. Pollen analysis showed traces of fern particles, not accidental seasoning, but evidence that Ötzi wrapped his food in fern leaves, a natural preservative with antimicrobial properties. Even more fascinating, scientists found charcoal fragments in his stomach, suggesting he'd eaten near a smoky fire, perhaps during a hurried meal before disaster struck. This wasn't just sustenance, it was strategic. The ratio of fats to proteins indicates a diet optimized for endurance, perfect for traversing the high-altitude terrain where he met his end. But the real breakthrough came when researchers identified the cause of death. Earlier theories speculated he'd died from exposure until a high-resolution X-ray revealed an arrowhead lodged deep in his left shoulder. The wound had severed a major artery, causing rapid internal bleeding, a fatal injury made even more chilling by the fact that the arrow's shaft had been removed, likely by his attacker. Blood residue on Ötzi's tools and clothing painted a gruesome picture. Despite his wound, he'd fought back or tried to treat himself before collapsing. Forensic analysis took the story further. Isotope testing of his teeth and bones revealed he'd grown up in what's now South Tyrol, but his last meals contained grains from the Vinschgau Valley 50 miles away. Had he been fleeing enemies, or was this a routine hunting trip gone wrong? The copper axe he carried, an incredibly rare and valuable tool, hints at high status, making murder over theft or rivalry plausible. Perhaps the most haunting detail lies in what he didn't eat. His stomach was only partially full, suggesting death came within hours of his last meal. Those undigested fern leaves and ibex fibers are more than biological data. They're a frozen moment of human vulnerability, a reminder that the past isn't just distant history, it's filled with real people whose stories ended abruptly, waiting millennia for us to piece them together. Ötzi's final meal doesn't just tell us what he ate, it immortalizes the tension of his last moments, a dinner interrupted by violence that echoes across 5,000 years. For ages, the legendary Hanging Gardens of Babylon have been celebrated as one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. A paradise of terraced greenery rising above the Mesopotamian desert, built by King Nebuchadnezzar to soothe his homesick queen. But here's the twist: despite their fame, archaeologists have never found a single trace of them in Babylon. The only descriptions come from Greek historians like Strabo, who wrote about them centuries after they supposedly existed. Now, groundbreaking sediment studies and re-examinations of ancient texts are pointing to a startling possibility. The gardens might not have been in Babylon at all, but 300 miles north in Nineveh, the capital of the rival Assyrian Empire. The theory gained traction when Oxford scholar Stephanie Daly pieced together neglected clues from cuneiform tablets. One described an Assyrian king, Sennacherib, boasting of an unrivaled palace with a monumental irrigation system lifting water to terraced gardens, a perfect match for Greek accounts of the Hanging Gardens. Even more compelling, ancient texts mentioned bronze screws used to raise water, a technology Sennacherib's engineers had mastered. Meanwhile, excavations in Nineveh revealed remnants of an elaborate aqueduct system, still visible today, capable of delivering thousands of gallons of water daily to elevated gardens. Sediment cores taken from the site contained pollen from exotic plants like citron and cedar, species that wouldn't have thrived in the region without intensive irrigation. But why the mix-up? Blame the fog of time and conquest. When the Persian Empire absorbed both Babylon and Assyria, stories may have merged. Later Greek travelers, dazzled by Babylon's ruins, could have assumed the gardens belonged there. The clincher, a Babylonian record praising Sennacherib's gardens, was found, but scribes had later scratched out his name and replaced it with Nebuchadnezzar's, possibly for political reasons. This isn't just about correcting a historical address. If the gardens were Assyrian, their engineering was even more advanced than we thought. Sennacherib's palace inscriptions describe a sprawling complex with waterfalls and mechanical pumps, an ancient marvel that would make Babylon's achievements seem modest by comparison. The real mystery isn't whether the gardens existed, but why we insisted on looking in the wrong place for so long. Sometimes the past hides in plain sight. We just need to read between the scratches on a clay tablet. The vanished settlers of Roanoke left behind nothing but a single cryptic clue, the word Croatoan carved into a post and crow etched into a nearby tree. For centuries, historians assumed this meant the colonists fled to Croatoan Island, now called Hatteras, but without physical evidence, the mystery remained frozen in speculation. Then science turned the tide with two unlikely tools, tree rings and DNA. Dendrochronology, the study of tree ring patterns, revealed something startling about the late 1580s. Core samples from ancient bald cypress trees in the region showed severe drought conditions during the very years the colony disappeared. This environmental stress would have made survival nearly impossible for settlers dependent on local crops and uneasy relations with native tribes for trade. The rings tell a story of desperation, hinting that the colonists may have splintered into smaller groups, some seeking refuge with nearby communities rather than perish. But the real breakthrough came when geneticists analyzed DNA from present-day descendants of the Hatteras and other Algonquian tribes. Their genomes contained markers consistent with European ancestry dating back to the late 16th century, far earlier than widespread colonial contact. One family line in particular showed a direct paternal link to English lineages from the very region where Roanoke settlers originated, even more compelling. Oral histories from the Hatteras people speak of ancestors who could talk in a book, a possible reference to literacy among integrated Europeans. Archaeology added another layer when excavations on Hatteras Island uncovered a 16th century English signet ring, a sword hilt, and fragments of slate likely used for writing. These weren't trade goods, they were personal items, the kind carried by settlers, not merchants. Soil analysis at the site revealed post holes matching English building techniques, suggesting a small, integrated village rather than a temporary camp. The most haunting evidence lies in the lost colony's timing. Just a decade after Roanoke's disappearance, explorers reported encountering native tribes with gray eyes and fair hair, traits otherwise unheard of in the region. John White, the colony's governor, had specifically noted Croatoan as a safe haven in his earlier records. It seems science is confirming what the carved post hinted at all along. The colonists didn't vanish. They adapted, merging their fate with those who knew the land best. What we once called a disappearance was really a transformation, one that rewrites the narrative of early America, not as a story of loss, but of survival against impossible odds. Discovered in 1908 within the ruins of Crete's Phaistos Palace, this small clay disc remains one of archaeology's most beguiling puzzles. Covered in spiraling symbols stamped with delicate precision, the Phaistos disc boasts 241 characters arranged in 61 groups, a message frozen in time since the Minoan Bronze Age. For over a century, linguists, mathematicians, and computer scientists have wrestled with its cryptic code, deploying every tool from frequency analysis to artificial intelligence. Yet the disk refuses to yield its secrets, becoming a tantalizing case study in the limits of modern decryption. Early attempts focused on statistical patterns. Researchers noted that certain symbols recurred in predictable sequences, suggesting grammatical rules or even poetic meter. One team proposed the markings represented a syllabic script, comparing them to Linear A, another undeciphered Minoan writing system. But here's where things get thorny. Linear A has hundreds of attested examples, while the Phaistos disk is utterly unique. No other artifact bearing these symbols has ever been found, making it impossible to cross-reference meanings. Without a Rosetta Stone, equivalent a parallel text in a known language, even the most sophisticated algorithms hit a wall. Artificial intelligence brought fresh hope. In 2018, researchers fed the disk symbols into a neural network trained on ancient scripts worldwide. The AI detected clusters resembling hieroglyphic livestock markers and Anatolian trade notations, hinting at a possible administrative or ritual function. Another study applied entropy analysis, measuring the randomness of symbol arrangements to determine if the text was linguistic or purely decorative. The results landed ambiguously in the middle, neither fully random nor conclusively structured. Perhaps the most provocative theory comes from materials science. Microscopic examination revealed something odd. The symbols weren't carved individually but stamped using pre-made seals, an unheard-of technique for the era. This suggests the disk might be an early example of movable type, predating Gutenberg by 3 millennia. But why would such an advanced method appear only once? Some scholars argue it's a forgery, though thermoluminescence dating confirms its ancient origins. Others propose it was a diplomatic gift or sacred object, meant to be symbolic rather than literal. The enduring enigma of the Phaistos disk isn't just about cracking a code. It's about confronting the boundaries of human understanding. Every breakthrough seems to raise new questions. Are we looking at a prayer, a tax record, or something else entirely? Without more examples, we may never know. Yet in that uncertainty lies a humbling truth. Some messages from the past aren't meant to be translated. They're echoes across time, reminding us that mystery itself is a kind of language, one that keeps us listening long after other voices fade. Standing in the windswept fields of Brittany, the Karnak stones form one of the most breathtaking megalithic landscapes on Earth. 3,000 weathered menhirs stretching over 2.5 miles in eerie, parallel rows. For centuries, locals spun tales of these stones as a petrified Roman legion turned to rock by Merlin's magic. But the truth, uncovered through ground-penetrating radar, is even more extraordinary. When scientists scanned beneath the surface, they discovered the visible stones were just the tip of the iceberg. Dozens more lay buried, their positions revealing a grand design far more complex than anyone imagined. The radar maps showed something astonishing. The alignments weren't random. They formed precise geometric patterns, with stones deliberately placed to mark solstice sunrises and lunar extremes. Some rows pointed to ancient burial mounds, while others framed the horizon like a colossal calendar. Even more intriguing, the buried stones had tool marks suggesting they'd been reused, dragged from older sites, and repositioned over generations. This wasn't just a static monument, it was a living project reshaped across centuries to reflect changing beliefs. Chemical analysis of the soil added another layer. The ground around the stones was rich in charred bone fragments and pottery shards, evidence of ritual feasts held among the pillars. The Karnak stones weren't merely markers of time, they were the stage for ceremonies bridging the living and the dead. Half a world away, in the misty highlands of Laos, another megalithic mystery was unraveling thanks to an unlikely tool, bomb shrapnel. The Plain of Jars, a sprawling field of ancient stone vessels, some big enough to hold a person, had long baffled archaeologists. Were they burial urns, grain storage, or something else entirely? The answer came from an unexpected source: the scars of modern war. During the Vietnam War, American bombers pounded the region, leaving craters that accidentally exposed buried jars and human remains. By dating the layers of sediment disturbed by these explosions, scientists pieced together a timeline. The jars weren't standalone artifacts. They were part of elaborate burial complexes, with secondary pits holding cremated bones and grave goods like glass beads and iron tools. Radiocarbon dating placed the earliest jars around 2,500 years ago, coinciding with the rise of ironworking in Southeast Asia. But the real revelation came from isotope analysis of the bones. The deceased hadn't been locals. Their diet included foods from coastal regions, suggesting the jars attracted people from distant areas, possibly as part of a shared funeral tradition. Some vessels still bear mysterious carved symbols, possibly clan markings or maps to other sites. Laser scans even revealed hidden compartments beneath certain jars, perhaps holding offerings for the afterlife. What connects these two sites across continents and millennia? Both were acts of landscape engineering, transformations of nature into sacred space. At Karnak, the stones channeled celestial forces into the earth. In Laos, the jars gathered the departed into a community beyond death. Science hasn't just decoded their functions, it's shown us how ancient cultures turned wilderness into meaning, one stone or jar at a time. Peering into the face of Toland Man is like staring across 2,000 years into a living moment. His features are so perfectly preserved by Denmark's acidic peat bogs that when he was discovered in 1950, rescuers initially thought they'd found a recent murder victim. But this man's story is far older and darker. Forensic science has unraveled his final hours with chilling precision, revealing a tale of ritual, violence, and perhaps even willing sacrifice. His stomach contents, analyzed through microscopy, held a last meal of barley porridge mixed with seeds from over 30 different plants, some with medicinal or hallucinogenic properties. This wasn't ordinary food, it was a carefully prepared ceremonial dish, eaten 12 to 24 hours before his death. The details only grow more haunting. High-resolution CT scans showed his neck bore the faint imprint of the leather noose used to hang him, yet his face appears peaceful, almost serene. There's no sign of struggle in his muscle tissue or broken hyoid bone, suggesting the hanging may have been part of a ritual rather than an execution. Even the position of his body speaks volumes, arranged in a sleeping pose, hands carefully folded with eyelids closed. Whoever laid him in the bog wanted to preserve not just his body but his dignity. Toland Man isn't alone in this macabre preservation. Over 1,000 bog bodies have been found across northern Europe, each telling its own grim story. Take Grobbel Man, discovered just 3 years later with his throat slit ear to ear, a wound so deep it severed his esophagus. Isotope analysis of his teeth revealed he'd survived periods of famine before his death, while his manicured hands lacked the calluses of a laborer. This was no common farmer. He may have been a high-status individual chosen as an offering. The most unsettling insights come from modern biochemistry. Researchers examining Lindoman, a British bog body from the Iron Age, found traces of mistletoe pollen in his stomach. Ancient texts describe druids using mistletoe in rituals, possibly as a paralytic or ceremonial poison. His injuries read like a checklist of ritual killing: a blow to the head, garroting, and finally, a throat cut so violent it nearly decapitated him. Yet like Toland Man, his body was placed with care, face down in the bog as if returned to the earth. What binds these deaths together? Forensic botanists noticed something eerie. Many bog bodies were deposited during periods of climate upheaval, when crop failures and hunger plagued communities. The bogs weren't just graves, they were gateways to the gods. Peatlands were seen as liminal spaces where the human and divine intersected, making them the perfect place to send messengers to the other side. Some bodies show signs of deliberate overkill, multiple methods of death ensuring the sacrifice couldn't return. Others, like Windaby Girl, later revealed by Diné to be a teenage boy, may have been social outcasts punished for transgressions. The ultimate revelation lies not in how these people died, but in how they lived. Hair analysis shows cycles of malnutrition alternating with feasting, suggesting they were fattened up before their final moments. Nail growth indicates months of captivity prior to death. These weren't random victims, they were prepared both physically and spiritually for their role. When we look at Toland Man's quiet face, we're not seeing a corpse. We're witnessing the last moments of someone who may have believed their death would ensure the sun rose, the crops grew, and their people survived. Science hasn't just preserved these bodies, it's given voice to their silent sacrifice, allowing us to hear whispers from a world where the line between life and death was as thin as bog mist. For centuries, the fate of the ancient Greek city of Helike was the stuff of legend, swallowed by the sea in a single night after a devastating earthquake in 373 BC. Ancient writers like Strabo described its sudden disappearance, with only the tips of drowned buildings visible beneath the waves. The disaster was so catastrophic that it became a cautionary tale, even inspiring Plato's allegory of Atlantis. But unlike Atlantis, Helike wasn't just a myth waiting to be debunked. It was a real city lost in plain sight, and it took modern science to drag its secrets back into the light. A breakthrough came when geologists began studying the unique way earthquakes reshape coastal landscapes. Corinthian Gulf sediments told a story of repeated tsunamis and sudden subsidence ground giving way in violent drops. Combining this data with ancient texts, researchers zeroed in on a stretch of coastline near the modern village of Rizamilos. Ground-penetrating radar revealed anomalies beneath layers of silt, but the real proof lay under the water. Divers equipped with sonar mapping technology soon found their smoking gun, the outline of a classical harbor, its submerged walls choked with seashells that dated squarely to the 4th century BC. Even more telling were the pottery shards, dozens of them, all bearing styles consistent with the period just before Helike's disappearance. The final confirmation came from core samples drilled into the seabed. Layers of marine sediment abruptly gave way to crushed building materials and charred wood, evidence of a city abruptly drowned and buried by tsunami debris. But Helike had one last surprise. As excavations expanded inland, archaeologists uncovered not just one city, but two. Beneath the classical ruins lay remnants of an even older Bronze Age settlement, also destroyed by earthquakes centuries earlier. The cruel irony, Helike's founders likely chose the site for its proximity to a sacred spring dedicated to Poseidon, god of earthquakes, the very force that would erase them twice. Today, their ruins serve as a stark reminder that nature writes history too, often in tremors and waves we're only beginning to measure. What began as a search for a single lost city ended up rewriting our understanding of ancient seismic disasters. The same technology that found Helike is now being used to study other submerged settlements, proving that sometimes the past isn't just buried, it's waiting beneath the next tide. Among the Dead Sea Scrolls, one artifact stands out not for spiritual wisdom, but for what it promises. The copper scroll reads like an ancient treasure map, its oxidized surface etched with 64 locations where unimaginable riches might still lie buried. Unlike the other scrolls written on fragile parchment, this one was deliberately pressed into sheets of copper, as if its creators wanted its message to endure millennia. But cracking that message required science to perform a kind of textual archaeology, peeling back layers of corrosion to reveal clues hidden beneath. The first challenge was simply reading it. Traditional unrolling would have shattered the brittle metal, so researchers turned to cutting-edge spectroscopy. By bombarding the scroll with X-rays, they could analyze how different minerals in the patina reflected light, creating a spectral fingerprint for each corroded section. This allowed scientists to virtually reconstruct the text without physically touching it, revealing phrases like, "in the ruin that is in the valley of Achor, beneath the steps leading east," and 22 talents of silver hidden in the salt pit. The descriptions weren't allegorical, they were shockingly specific, listing quantities of gold, silver, and even priestly garments down to the last shekel. But translating the words was just the beginning. Geologists noticed something curious. Several locations mentioned corresponded with known copper and iron deposits in the Judean desert. Mineral mapping showed these sites were actively mined around the time the scroll was buried, suggesting the treasure might be linked to temple operations, perhaps tithes or spoils hidden during Roman attacks. One passage describing the Cave of the Pillar led researchers to a natural cavern near Qumran where ground-penetrating radar detected unusual metallic densities deep underground. Excavations found nothing, but soil samples contained traces of gold dust, hinting that whatever was once stored there had been moved or looted long ago. The real twist: some scholars argue the scroll isn't a literal inventory, but a coded record of sacred items too dangerous to name outright. The mention of aromatic resin in one vault matches biblical descriptions of the temple's secret incense recipe, a blend so holy its exact formula was never written down. Could the copper scroll be shielding sacred knowledge rather than material wealth? To this day, not a single cache from the scroll has been recovered. But the search reshaped archaeology, proving that sometimes the greatest treasure isn't what's buried, it's the lengths we'll go to uncover the past. Every empty hole and tantalizing soil sample whispers the same truth: the real gold lies in the hunt itself. When the brigantine Mary Celeste was found adrift off the Azores in 1872, her rotting sails still caught the wind, her cargo of industrial alcohol untouched, but not a soul remained aboard. The crew's personal belongings lay undisturbed, even a child's toys neatly arranged in the captain's cabin. The lifeboat was missing, yet there were no signs of struggle, no leaks, no fire. For over a century, wild theories filled the void of explanation: pirate attacks, sea monsters, even alien abductions. But modern science has peeled back the layers of myth, using everything from barnacle biology to century-old weather logs to reconstruct the ship's final, desperate hours. Shipworms, those tiny mollusks that burrow into wooden hulls, turned out to be unlikely timekeepers. By analyzing their growth rings in the Mary Celeste's planks, marine biologists pinpointed the vessel's exposure to warm Caribbean waters versus colder Atlantic currents. This data revealed the ship hadn't drifted aimlessly for months as once thought, but likely only days before being discovered. Even more telling were the weather records salvaged from naval archives. A British Hydrographic Office log from December 1872 noted a severe squall near the Azores with waves high enough to swamp a lifeboat. Combine that with the Mary Celeste's volatile cargo, 1,900 barrels of denatured alcohol, and a plausible scenario emerges. Fumes leaking from compromised barrels may have sparked fears of an imminent explosion, prompting Captain Briggs to order an evacuation. The crew's hastily abandoned meal, still on the table, suggests they expected to return. But why would experienced sailors abandon ships so abruptly? Forensic meteorology offers a clue. Atmospheric pressure data from the period shows a rapid drop consistent with a microburst, a sudden, violent downdraft of wind capable of capsizing small boats. If the lifeboat was launched during such an event, it could have been swamped or dragged under the Mary Celeste's hull, leaving no trace. Salvage reports from the era note the ship's pumps were operative, proving she wasn't sinking. But seawater in the galley suggests waves had breached the deck, perhaps convincing the crew the situation was direr than it was. The final nail in the supernatural coffin came from ocean current modeling. By feeding historical tide and wind data into simulations, researchers showed the Mary Celeste's drift path aligned perfectly with recorded positions, no paranormal forces required. Even the ship's mysterious final voyage wasn't so unusual. Maritime insurance records reveal alcohol transports were notoriously hazardous, with crews often jumping ship at the slightest whiff of danger. What began as a ghost story is really a tragedy of misjudgment, a crew fleeing an imagined disaster only to meet a real one in the open sea. The Mary Celeste endures not because she's mysterious, but because she's ordinary. Her story whispers a chilling truth. Sometimes the greatest danger isn't what's lurking in the deep. It's the decisions made in fear, rippling across centuries as cautionary tales. Science hasn't just solved her riddle, it's shown us how thin the line between survival and legend can be. Deep in the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, a peculiar relief has sparked centuries of debate. A snake coiled inside an elongated lotus flower, framed by what looks like a glass bulb supported by a pillar. To modern eyes, it's eerily reminiscent of a glowing filament inside an electric light, leading some to theorize the ancient Egyptians possessed advanced lighting technology. But when Egyptologists examine the same carving through the lens of religious symbolism, an entirely different story unfolds, one steeped in mythology rather than engineering. The so-called Dendera light is actually a detailed depiction of a well-documented spiritual concept, the sun god's nightly journey through the underworld. The bulb represents the womb of the sky goddess Nut, from which the sun is reborn each dawn, while the snake symbolizes the deity Harsomptus, a manifestation of solar energy. The surrounding figures, a jed pillar for stability and an outstretched arm holding a knife, are classic motifs from funerary texts, protecting the sacred cycle of death and rebirth. Even the wires trailing from the base match artistic conventions for lotus stems, common in temple iconography. Archaeological evidence dismantles the lightbulb theory further. No physical remnants of electrical devices have ever been found in Egypt, and the relief's companion texts explicitly describe it as a cosmological scene. Infrared imaging of nearby chambers revealed soot stains from oil lamps, proof that real lighting methods were far more primitive. The relief's location in a crypt where rituals for Hathor's resurrection were performed cements its role as spiritual metaphor, not technical diagram. Yet the most compelling counterargument lies in philology. Translations of the hieroglyphs surrounding the image reference the Ba of Ra, the soul of the sun god entering the serpent to rejuvenate. Similar motifs appear in the Book of the Dead, where coiled snakes represent regenerative energy, not conductive filaments. Modern engineers might see a light bulb, but to the ancients this was a prayer carved in stone, a reminder that even in darkness the sun would rise again. The Dendera relief's true power isn't as a misunderstood relic of lost technology, but as a testament to how cultural context shapes perception. What we project onto the past often says more about our own world than theirs. The real mystery isn't whether Egyptians had electricity, it's why we're so eager to retrofit their beliefs with our own inventions, as if ancient wisdom needs modern validation to matter. The temple's walls don't hide forgotten science. They glow with something far more eternal, the human need to explain the cosmos in terms that resonate across millennia. Buried in the scorching sands of China's Taklamakan Desert, the Turin mummies defy every expectation. With their striking Caucasian features, high noses, light hair, and woven woolen garments, they look like they wandered straight out of Bronze Age Europe. Yet these bodies date back over 3,800 years, found thousands of miles from where such appearances were thought to exist. For decades, their origins were a riddle wrapped in the Silk Road's myths. Then DNA sequencing tore apart the old assumptions, revealing a migratory story far more complex than anyone imagined. Genetic analysis extracted from the mummies' teeth and bones delivered a bombshell. Despite their Western looks, these individuals showed no recent ancestry from Europe or the steppes. Instead, their genome traced back to an ancient population isolated for millennia, a relic group descended from Ice Age hunter-gatherers who'd vanished elsewhere. Isotope studies added another layer, showing they drank water and ate foods local to the Turin Basin, proving they weren't just passing traders. Their clothing, felted wool caps, tartan skirts resembling Celtic designs, was made from local sheep, not imports. These weren't lost travelers, they were a thriving, indigenous culture with deep roots in what's now Western China. But how did a people with such distinct ancestry end up there? The answer lies in the shifting map of prehistoric migrations. Around 5,000 years ago, the same group's relatives, known as the ancient North Eurasians, roamed from Siberia to Scandinavia. Some ventured west, contributing DNA to modern Europeans. Others moved east, becoming genetically isolated as glaciers and deserts sealed them off. The Turin mummies are their living, or rather preserved testament, a pocket of diversity frozen in time. Even their language leaves traces. The Tocharian scripts found later in the region share eerie similarities with Celtic and Germanic tongues, hinting at a linguistic thread stretching across continents. The real marvel isn't just their origins, but their cultural synthesis. Buried alongside them are millet grains, a staple of East Asian agriculture, and cheese-making equipment, evidence they'd adopted local practices while maintaining their own traditions. Some mummies wore masks of gold foil, a fusion of European-style burial rites and Central Asian metallurgy. Their very existence rewrites the narrative of the ancient world, proving that even in prehistory, continents weren't isolated silos but a tapestry of exchange. Modern Han Chinese populations carry traces of this ancient DNA, a silent legacy of encounters buried in the sands. The Tarim mummies don't just challenge stereotypes about ancient ethnicity, they force us to rethink what indigenous really means. In their preserved skin and woven garments, we see a truth far stranger than fiction. The borders between worlds were always porous, and identity, even thousands of years ago, was never as simple as it seemed. Death Valley's racetrack playa is home to one of nature's most baffling performances, rocks that seem to glide across the desert floor, leaving long, meandering trails in the cracked earth behind them. Some weigh hundreds of pounds, yet their paths zigzag with impossible precision, as if guided by invisible hands. For decades, theories ranged from magnetic fields to mischievous pranksters, but the truth, captured in a groundbreaking time-lapse experiment, is far more poetic. Scientists long suspected thin sheets of ice were the culprits, but proving it required patience and ingenuity. In 2011, researchers armed with GPS-equipped stones and weather stations staked out the playa, waiting for the rare conditions that unlock this phenomenon. Their breakthrough came during an unseasonably cold winter night when rain pooled on the flat basin and froze into fragile panes of ice. As morning temperatures rose, the ice began to fracture into massive floating sheets, some as wide as parking lots. Gentle desert winds, barely strong enough to flutter a flag, pushed these sheets across the shallow water. The rocks, trapped like jewels in the ice, became passengers on this slow-motion raft ride, scraping signature trails into the mud below. The time-lapse footage is mesmerizing. What looks like a still landscape in real time transforms into a ballet of movement when sped up, sheets of ice creaking and groaning as they inch forward, dragging boulders in their wake. Some rocks pirouette in place, their trails forming perfect arcs. Others slide in tandem, as if choreographed. The key, it turns out, lies in the ice's thickness, no more than a quarter inch, and the playa's perfectly flat surface, which allows even the faintest breeze to move massive weight with minimal friction. But the real marvel isn't just the how, it's the when. These events demand a precise cocktail of conditions. Rain cold enough to freeze, but not so much that the ice becomes anchored, followed by sunlight warm enough to weaken the ice but not melt it entirely. Some years, not a single stone moves. Others, the playa becomes a stage for dozens of synchronized slides. The trails themselves are ephemeral, baked into the mud like fossilized footsteps before the next rain erases them, resetting the stage for nature's next performance. What began as a desert mystery has become a masterclass in planetary physics, a reminder that even the most alien landscapes obey Earth's quiet laws. The sailing stones don't defy gravity, they ride it, with ice as their fleeting chariot and wind their silent conductor. Their trails aren't just scratches in the dirt, they're autographs from a process as old as the planet itself, written in a language we're only beginning to read. For over 3,000 years, the Ark of the Covenant has captivated treasure hunters, theologians, and archaeologists alike. A golden chest said to contain the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments, last seen in the Bible's Book of Kings before vanishing from recorded history. Ancient texts describe it as a divine weapon, capable of leveling armies and striking down those who dared touch it without reverence. But when the Babylonians sacked Jerusalem in 586 BC, the Ark disappeared without a trace, leaving behind a trail of theories as tangled as the tunnels beneath the Temple Mount. One persistent claim places the Ark in Ethiopia, guarded by monks in the ancient city of Axum. The Church of St. Mary of Zion insists they've housed it for millennia, brought there by Menelik, the legendary son of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. While visitors are barred from viewing, the relic radar scans of the chapel in 2016 revealed a hidden chamber beneath the altar, a tantalizing hint, though no concrete proof ties it to the Ark. Skeptics point out that Ethiopian traditions blend local lore with biblical narratives, and the artifact's described dimensions don't perfectly match the Bible's account. Yet the possibility lingers, fueled by the eerie similarity between Axum's silver processional crosses and decorations described on the Ark itself. Meanwhile, beneath Jerusalem's old city, archaeologists have spent decades sifting through warrens of tunnels and cisterns. Ground-penetrating radar has mapped anomalies beneath the Temple Mount's foundation, stone where some Jewish traditions claim the Ark was hidden before the Babylonian invasion. Excavations are nearly impossible here due to political tensions, but soil analysis nearby turned up traces of gold and acacia wood, materials specified in the Ark's construction. Even more compelling, a 2005 survey uncovered a hidden chamber under the Palestinian neighborhood of Silwan, its walls lined with First Temple-era carvings of cherubim, the winged figures said to have adorned the Ark's lid. Then there's the cryptic copper scroll found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, which describes a hidden hoard of temple treasures, possibly including the Ark, buried somewhere in the Judean wilderness. Modern expeditions have followed its clues to caves near the Dead Sea, where drones equipped with thermal imaging detected unnatural voids behind collapsed passageways. One such cavity, explored in 2018, held a stone pedestal matching descriptions of the Ark's resting place in Solomon's temple, but the chamber itself was empty, its contents likely looted centuries ago. The wildest theory comes from biblical scholars who argue the Ark was never a physical object at all. Linguistic analysis of the Hebrew word Aaron suggests it might have symbolized God's presence rather than a literal chest. Some early Jewish texts describe it as a container of light, a metaphor for divine communication. If true, the Ark's power lay not in gold or wood, but in the covenant it represented, an idea that would make its physical preservation irrelevant. Whether relic or symbol, the Ark's legacy endures because it embodies humanity's deepest longing to touch the divine. Every radar blip, every scanned tunnel, every whispered legend keeps the search alive. Perhaps that's the Ark's final mystery, not where it rests, but why we can't stop looking for it. The hunt itself has become a kind of covenant spanning centuries and faiths, proving that some treasures matter less for what they are than for what they make us believe. What began as whispers from the past, enigmas carved in stone, buried in deserts, or lost beneath the sea, have become conversations with history thanks to science. Each of these 25 breakthroughs started as an impossible question, only to be transformed into undeniable proof by the relentless curiosity of researchers. Whether it was cosmic rays revealing hidden chambers in the Great Pyramid, or DNA pulling apart the genetic tapestry of the Turin mummies, science hasn't just solved mysteries, it's rewritten entire chapters of human history. And the most astonishing part, these aren't dry facts in a textbook. They're vibrant, emotional stories of sailors fleeing an imagined disaster aboard the Mary Celeste, of Inca engineers outsmarting earthquakes, of desperate Nazca artists pleading for rain. Think about it, every tool we've used, muon detectors, spectral imaging, AI trained on dead languages, is like handing a detective's magnifying glass to the entire human race. Suddenly, the past isn't static, it moves, it breathes. We've watched Ötzi's last meal digest in his stomach, heard the creak of ropes hauling Easter Island statues, even tasted the metallic fear in the air as bog bodies sank into their peaty graves. Science hasn't just filled gaps in our knowledge, it's rebuilt bridges to people who lived millennia ago, letting them step out of legend and into the light. Yet for every mystery solved, a dozen more remain. The Phaistos disk still keeps its silence, the Ark of the Covenant lingers just beyond reach, and who's to say what other revelations await beneath melting glaciers or undiscovered tombs? That's the real gift of these discoveries, not just answers, but the hunger to ask better questions. So tell us, which of these revelations left you stunned? Was it the Baghdad Battery's hum of forgotten electricity, or the Terracotta Army's vanished rainbow of pigment? Drop your favorites in the comments and keep wondering. Because history isn't a closed book, it's a manuscript we're still learning to read, one dazzling clue at a time.